Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the Nashville Jewish Book Series in your living room. Tonight's program, we have local authors, entrepreneurs, multi-talented individuals, Marcus Whitney in conversation with Annie Klaver. Please feel free to type any questions that you have in the chat and they will be addressed later on in the program. And I wanted to, of course, remind everyone that you can purchase the book, Create and Orchestrate: The Path to Claiming Your Creative Power from an Unlikely Entrepreneur from bookshop.org or anywhere else books are sold. Before we begin, I wanted to thank Amy Goldstein, who is our wonderful author series chair, along with the rest of the committee. Jessica Banish, Tina Cohen, Lori Fischel, Amy Kammerman, Amy Katz, there's a lot of Amy's, Jacob Kupin, Miriam Leibowitz, Margaret Littman, Evan Namias, Nancy Reisman, and Freya Sachs. Now I would love to introduce you to Annie Klaver, who will be then introducing Marcus Whitney. Annie Klaver is a self-made woman. She started waitressing at 15, worked her way through college while taking on loans, taught English to French school children outside Paris, ran tri-continental logistics in Rotterdam, Netherlands for an American company acquired by IBM, helped scale up a digital marketing company on Music Row acquired by Ticketmaster, and finally was the top salesperson at a video production company acquired by AOL. I would not even believe that that's like a real person's life story because it's very cool. Annie was burnt out though. She had begun to explore more of the natural beauty of the city and bought a house on the Cumberland River a bit north of town. She took her kayak from her backyard upriver to Peeler Park, downriver to Riverfront Park, and everywhere in between, eventually finding the mental, emotional, and spiritual she sought through the healing power of nature. Eventually, she found herself wanting to share this natural beauty with others who might be in need of this type of connection, and thus River Queen Voyages was born. River Queen was Annie's nickname in the River Gang. Voyages come from obsessively listening to Jenny Lewis's The Voyager in the summer of 2014. And in 2015, Annie procured a permit from Metro Parks, bought a trailer and a load of kayaks from another outfitter on the Red River in Clarksville, and ran a successful Indiegogo campaign to fund it all. Every year, she reinvests profits back into the company and along the way garnered praise from the Nashville scene, which calls River Queen Voyages the best view of the city. In 2016, in a series of events that still make her pinch herself, she landed as a gig as a DJ on local radio station Lightning 100. Annie had reinvented herself as the River Queen on the waterways and the airwaves. So now, please welcome Annie Klaver.
Hi, thank you, Alex, for that wonderful introduction. And hello, everyone. I can't see you, but I know you're there. It's wonderful to be with you here tonight. Thank you for joining us. I am here because of my friend, Margaret Littman. I hope she's somewhere on the screens too. She's been a wonderful friend and mentor of mine. She invites me to Passover Seder, which is an event I love. And she also owns Nashville Paddle Company, which is out on Percy Priest Lake. So that's how we knew each other. And she knew that I knew Marcus already. So it all kind of came together. So I'm so happy to be with you here tonight in conversation with my friend Marcus, who we were just chatting about before getting on live here, that we've known each other for 14 years, which I don't know if that it's good to say out loud, makes me feel a little bit old, but I'm going to give you a quick little bit about Marcus, and then we'll start the conversation. Marcus is a self-taught software developer, entrepreneur, and venture capitalist with a track record of success in all areas. He's a founding partner of Jumpstart Health Investors, which is the most active venture capital firm in America, focused on innovative healthcare companies with a portfolio of over 100 companies. He's the author of the Amazon #1 best-selling book, Create and Orchestrate, which is incredible. You guys need to buy this book. It's about claiming your creative power through entrepreneurship. Marcus has been featured by Entrepreneur, CNBC, Inc., NPR, Fast Company, and The Atlantic. Hi, Marcus.
What's up, Annie?
How are you?
I'm awesome. And thanks everyone for showing up. Appreciate you.
Yes. This book is, I'm an entrepreneur myself, so I'm absolutely 100% the target audience. But and I've got tons of questions for you, and I'm really excited to talk about it. But I guess the first thing I wanted to ask is, was there a point where you're like, okay, I need to write a book, or was it, were you sort of asked by someone to do it, or kind of where did all of these experiences, at what point were you like, okay, I'm going to write these down. This is something I want to share with people.
Yeah, I think it really starts with a 2014 opportunity I had to give a talk at TEDx Nashville. And uh, I don't know exactly why I thought I should speak at TEDx Nashville, but I wanted to ever since it came about. And I got an opportunity to in 2014. And it was an incredibly difficult process to put together the talk, because the first talk I put, when you go through TEDx Nashville, you go through coaching. And so I put together an initial talk and I went to the coach, and like the coach, as he should have, just like totally ripped the talk apart. You know what I mean? It was like, it was long winded. I had like 7 points I was trying to get across. Um, and he kind of was like, this is a very Me Too thing. Like, what are you going to do that's going to be unique? And so I realized I needed to really dive into my own story, but then diving into my own story was going to require me to be like pretty vulnerable. So I did. I worked on it for like 40 hours, putting together this talk. Got on stage, did the talk, walked off totally terrified. It's because it was in TPAC and there's over 1,000 people there and there's big bright lights and stuff. And I hadn't done a lot of public speaking at that point, and so totally terrified. But then got called back out for standing ovation or whatever. Still didn't really believe that it was valuable. But then when I went outside, this teenage girl who was in the audience walked up to me and was like, that was awesome, and I'm going to put the words that you said, believe, partner up and orchestrate, on my ceiling, so I see them every day when I wake up. And that's when I was like, okay, that's cool. Like as a parent of teenagers, I was like, that's super cool. And I would like to be able to do that at a larger level. How could I scale using my story and what I've learned about entrepreneurship to maybe inspire more people, especially younger people. And so that was really the beginning of the seeds of this idea about writing a book.
I love that. I was I helped create TEDx Nashville back in the day, and I remember having you on that list of speakers and seeing your talk. And because I knew you, I could tell you were nervous, but it sort of dissipated. There's this sort of energy that I see that you get, and I can tap into it too when you're kind of in your flow, right? Where
Yeah.
you're like, this is something that I feel confident that I can talk about. And it's a strange place to get to. And I think I'm glad you talked about vulnerability, because they talk about what it takes to be an expert, and there is a point where you're like, okay, I've done this long enough, right? There's some sort of like self awareness, some self actualization, where I think people like us who are like to talk to people and like to share that can say like, oh, I might have something valuable to share with others. And so I think that's a really beautiful part of this book. And the way you write it is, what I loved about how you wrote it is that you don't assume anything, but you're also not talking down to anyone, right? So you're like, hey, there's a lot of acronyms. Let me just tell you what these acronyms mean.
Yeah.
There's a lot of yeah. So can you talk about like how, like who's the audience for this book?
Yeah. So the first chapter, I'm trying to set the stage for the belief that justified me taking the time and going through the pain of actually producing a book, because it's so hard, right, to write a book. And but I have a very, very strong feeling, and I feel like it's playing out right now in our country, which is that yes, we are a democracy, but really what runs this country day in and day out is capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And capitalism is this force that actually impacts all of these other things that we say are really, really important for society, like education, right? So we talk about how important education is, but we haven't controlled the education industry. And what's happened especially over the last 20, 25 years, is the return on investment for the average American in higher education is totally screwed. Like it's really, really bad. And in fact, I think I kind of lucked out by dropping out of college because it forced me to tap into the reality of how you can actually be successful in America, which is through entrepreneurship. And so and the thing that I learned is that entrepreneurship, the market does not really care about credentials. You know, the job market cares about credentials, academia cares about credentials, but the market cares about value, cares about the creation of value. It's all it really cares about. And in that way, it's the great equalizer, because if you're here, trust me, like, you're here to create value. That's what you're here in America to do.
Right.
And so, I'm trying to make the case that we have done a great disservice to society by not educating people about entrepreneurship. And so people are afraid of it, because they don't understand it. There are all these acronyms there. They don't know if they can do it. And it's really because they haven't been taught anything about it. I didn't really have a choice. I had to learn it. It was like survive or die, and yeah, I started by learning code, but ultimately I kind of knew I was going to have to move into entrepreneurship. So that's the foundation. And the reason why I don't come in assuming that you know anything is because I didn't know anything when I learned all this stuff. And I know how bad it felt to be in these rooms with people who would hold that over you, or would like look down on you because you didn't know these terms.
Right.
So I learned them all, and then I like threw away the 80% of it that was absolute nonsense. You know what I mean? And then just kind of distilled it down to, this is the most important part. This is the actual thing you got to know. And not only is this the actual thing you got to know, this is universal knowledge for every single business. There is no, there are no businesses that don't adhere to the 8 core concepts, and that I lay out in the center of the book. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, entrepreneurship as an equalizer, I love that idea. And I think you're right. There's a ton of student loan debt, and there's, a lot of barriers to entry, or maybe there are barriers of entry that are sort of in our own minds, right? So if you read this book, you're like, oh, maybe some of these barriers to entry aren't as, difficult to overcome as I thought. But one thing that came out in the book, and I'd love to talk about because I believe in this so much, that one thing that's critical that you cannot enter entrepreneurship without is having the right mindset.
Yeah.
So this is, I love what you say about mindset. And you talk about failure for like the first half of the book, which is also a vulnerable thing to do. But several times you say failure is not fatal, failure is not final, failure is developmental. So can you talk a little bit about the entrepreneur mindset and both failure and how that's critical to, it's win or learn, right? It's not win or lose, it's win or learn.
Yep.
And how did you have that already? Did you develop that? So can you kind of just talk us through mindset and as it has to do with entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I moved to Nashville in September of 2000, and I was waiting tables, and I had, a 1-year-old kid and another kid was on the way. I was in a corner and basically did not have a choice. I had to find a way to make a stable living. And so that was sort of the foundation for how I approached my career development, even into entrepreneurship. So I just, like, it would not have done any good to just get down on myself. You know what I mean? Because it's like, it just wouldn't have done any good. So I made so many mistakes early on, like the first year of learning how to code and then getting that first job and actually being really a terrible programmer for, a good year and a half before I got good enough to do the job I did at Emma. That was so hard that if I didn't have a mindset to just like every day, just get up and get back to it, I would have never succeeded. That's it, you know. But again, I didn't have a choice, you know. And I think you know, sometimes I think that that spending time and getting down on yourself for some people is like a bit of a luxury. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
you can afford to spend the time to do that. You know, I couldn't afford to spend the time to do that, and then that just became a habit, and that habit has served me well over the course of the last 20 years. And I've basically learned that, um, you know, in entrepreneurship, in the entrepreneurship is a career, and you can't get good without failure, because you can't learn those really, really important lessons that make you good without the experience of doing the thing wrong. Like no one, you're not going to get it out of a book or something like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I just think it's very, very mindset is fundamental, because failure is unavoidable.
Yes,
And so
I
if you
love
don't have a
that.
good, if you don't if you don't have a good way to process failure, if you don't have a positive way to process this inevitable experience and turn it into a developmental opportunity, then you know, you're going to be in trouble, because you're going to be misinterpreting what you're going to be misinterpreting the experience. You're going to be somehow using it as a lens to judge yourself, and that's not what it's about. You know what I mean?
So that's so interesting to talk about. And if you're willing to dig a little deeper into that, like, do you have a process for failure? Like, is there, like, do you talk it out with other people in your business circles or with your sort of private relationships? I mean, is there a methodology you've come up with?
So I think that what I've figured out is it's more about a regular practice,
Mm,
right? And so uh, there were times where I didn't have the healthiest practice for how I dealt with it, right? Um, so you know, there were times when probably my practice was more about, you know, going out and partying
mhm.
to kind of, you know, just like forget about it, and then wake up the next day with a hangover, and then, like, you know, the hangover became the thing I was thinking about, not the
Yeah.
failure. You know what I mean? And then
Here's
I
how I
like,
can get my mind off this.
yeah, exactly, exactly. You know, I think now I'm in a place where uh I'm processing everything just in real time. And meditation is great. You know, practicing, you got to be careful with it, because it could get into nihilism, but practicing some level of stoicism,
Mm,
where, you know, you just kind of keep things in perspective. You know, perspective's like super important, right? So you know, what is your perspective about this failure, you know, at the end of the day? And look, there's also a really big difference between uh doing the best you could, but making real mistakes, but they're honest mistakes.
mhm.
You know what I mean? And and then the outcome doesn't come out good. There's a big difference between that and like lying, or you know what
Right,
I mean? Or like
intent,
intention,
right?
yeah, like
Yeah,
intentionally, you know, if you fail but you did your best, you know, it shouldn't be this thing that for, you know, long extended periods of time weighs on your conscience.
right.
um but and look, I've lied, I've made these, you know, I've made the other kind of mistakes, the ones that do stick with you for a long time, right? You know what I mean? And so you try to do less of that. You know what I
Right.
mean? You know what I mean? You try to do less of that and make more of the honest mistakes. And then I think you just try to develop a practice that keeps perspective on the whole thing. You know what I mean?
And I love that you talk about this as a practice. I come from a family of perfectionists, and failure for me was always really hard. When I started doing yoga and meditation and got into things that were a practice, it was just such a relief for me. Like, there was a conscious sort of heart rate drop when I was like, oh, I'm just constantly practicing everything forever.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
when you talk about mindset, yeah, if there's less pressure, if I put less pressure on myself to reach a certain end point, or to say that this is going to be done a certain way by a certain time, and kind of like just get into the flow of life, and that can kind of take me places where I didn't originally intend to go, and they
Sure.
can take me better places than I would have been. So um I love how you talk about that, as a practice. And then how is that translated for you into being a good leader? Because you talk a lot about leadership in here. There's tons of great pull quotes. You know, you talk about believing it as if it's already true, which is a great technique. I try to do that all the time. You talk about another one of my favorite things was the iron triangle. We
Mm.
talk about time, scope, and resources.
Mm-hmm.
Are those things that you do both for yourself and for your teams, or kind of how do you
Well,
practice that?
they're axioms that over time you pick up. You pick them up on your travels as an entrepreneur. You meet
Yeah.
wise people, in your journey, and they teach you things like the iron triangle. And I think I learned the iron triangle in 2003, but it's an enduring axiom. You know what I mean? And like it serves me to this day when I get into a meeting and people start talking about stuff and it's clear they don't know about it. It's
Yeah.
clear, because they're just like totally violating it. And just for and for everybody who's on the call, the idea of the iron triangle is if you're trying to actually be pragmatic about getting something accomplished, you have to sort of understand the limitations of the things you're working with, the time you have with which to do something, the scope of the thing you're trying to achieve, and then the resources that you're working with. That's the iron triangle. And you get to this point where you can kind of size up the iron triangle in your head just listening to what someone's talking about they're trying to do, because you string together so many experiences, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And then you just run them through that mental model of like, is that building gonna stand? That building ain't gonna stand. You know what I mean? And which one they've sort of totally discarded. Often, often resources,
Yep.
and then what happens. So here's how that plays into leadership. So often people don't properly respect the resources, and then they put unreasonable expectations on the resources, the people, right? To like achieve things that the people are not capable of achieving within the time that you've given them. You know what I mean? Um, so, but I've learned that by making that mistake,
Right.
then like dealing with the pain of it. You know what I mean? Um, and I look, I one of the things about uh, stringing together more than a decade of experiences, especially if they've been in more than one company, is, I've been through layoffs that I've had to, you know, I've had to do them. I've had to do the layoff. I've been fired. You know what I mean? Like I've been through these things, and I'm fine. And all the people that I laid off are fine. They're better. You know what I mean? So like you go through these things where you're so much anxiety about that moment, but then you fast forward, you look back on it. These people are still friends. You all still admire each other. They've gone on to other positions. They're in a much better fit than being managed by a much better person than you. You know what I mean? So you just sort of realize like it'll all be fine. It'll all be fine. You're just making decisions for this business that you're in that moment. But people are resilient, and they weren't born and they won't die with this job, that they're in today. So, again, perspective, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not trying to overstate the grandiosity of the thing that you're doing, kind of helps you approach it with just more reasonableness.
Yeah, and it's a balance, right? Between that and also motivating your people to believe that what you're doing is important and meaningful, right?
I mean, yes, I I think so. And I think that I am more and more leaning into this idea that I'm trying to I'm trying to communicate to them what we collectively are trying to achieve. And then individually, I'm trying to make sure that they each know that it is um, how they fit into it. And I'm trying to confirm that this is valuable for them in this time that they're working on it. You know what I mean? Because like if I'm the founder and I own the majority of the company, or me and my partners own the majority of the company, like it's it's not the same.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They work for us. So I mean, yes, I'm trying to say that this thing is great, but it's like even in your story, as Alex was talking about your all the different things that you did. I mean, they've led to this moment where it's like, to quote, Joe Biden, it's like your whole soul is in this thing,
Yeah.
right? You know what I mean? And now you brought incredible skills to all these other experiences. They were other people's companies, right? They were developmental for you, but they're not the same as River Queen. Like,
Yeah. And I got to make my mistakes with other people's money, which is always better to
which is
do.
which is great. Which is great. I mean, you worked with entrepreneurs, right? So you were in entrepreneurial environments, and and that's pretty much being an entrepreneur. I mean, it's not the full thing, it's not the full load, but if you're in an entrepreneurial environment, you're dealing with
Right. You're
all of
learning
those
that all that
realities.
by osmosis.
Yes.
Um, I love that you say leadership is the creation and reinforcement of culture. And in the book, you talk about some things that make a good leader. Discipline, especially of yourself, which I read that. I was like, "Ugh."
Yeah. Sorry.
Being honest with yourself, which again is, I think, a process and a practice. Accepting new perspectives. That one can be tricky too.
Yeah.
Um, you're always responsible for the outcome. I loved that one where it's a real like buck stops here. Like someone else makes a mistake, maybe you didn't tell them how to do it right, you know, and maybe they just messed up. But you know, allowing the possibility that you know, maybe it was something that they weren't trained correctly on,
Yep.
and of course that win or learn. Um, so are there any kind of stories you can share about and the soccer stadium comes to mind, which I'm sure a lot of people on this call are anxious to hear some of your perspective on that, about accepting new perspectives, in relation to that or to anything else. I think that's a huge part of staying teachable, staying humble, and being a good leader. So I loved that one.
Yeah, sure. I grew a lot through the soccer experience because, I came into it, uh, like so many other things that I do in Nashville from a civic perspective. And that's legitimate. I mean, it was a nonprofit, fourth division. In U.S. soccer, we have four divisions. The first two are professional, and the third and fourth are basically pro-am. The fourth is for sure amateur. And we had a fourth division amateur team. It was a nonprofit, so it was a civic endeavor that I got involved with, as chairman. But market dynamics, this was happening at the same time Nashville was really having its city moment, and
What year was this?
2015.
Okay.
2015. So a lot of its city energy,
Mhm.
was going on around here, and I could tell that professional soccer was going to come to town, and there were these people who had poured their heart and soul, quite frankly, more than I did. The people who were the founding board of this nonprofit, and the people who started the original supporters club, who were like driving all over the Southeast United States to follow this fourth division amateur team and support them.
You
Okay.
mean you weren't doing that, Marcus?
I was not doing that. No. I love those people. I know them, and they're good friends of mine. But I wasn't doing that stuff. And so I felt I had a responsibility to make
Mhm.
sure that what I felt was inevitable, which was that professional soccer was going to come to Nashville, um, didn't wipe out their legacy.
Yeah,
That was really it.
it's a
And
big
so,
deal. Yeah.
totally, uh, and so I took the skill that I was really still in the process of developing, but it was far enough along that I could do it, which was, how do I package something up so that it is viable for investment?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? I was like right at the point where I got good enough to pull it off. And so that's what we did. We got approval from, we did a vote. We got approval from the membership of the nonprofit to move forward, and explore what it would look like to go pro. we held an investment meeting, and we put together an investment group that was led by David Dill, who's now the CEO of LifePoint Health. So we're going ahead, we're doing that. Then we get the franchise, and like the next day in the news, a whole new dynamic like that we didn't know about just like enters our world.
So talk about that. Talk about that day. Did you like get the newspaper article, or did someone send
Yeah.
it to you like, oh, holy shit, Marcus, did you know this was happening?
It was something like that. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, look, I mean, it was definitely a wow moment. And there was like so many feelings, because on one hand, like we had just gotten the franchise, like we were, it's a done deal. We had, it's not just like we already did it. It was more like we committed to this league, that we were going to bring a team to Nashville to play in this league. People think about it, oh, I got the franchise, it's like something I have. It's actually a commitment.
Right.
That's what getting a franchise is. It's a commitment to the league and the other owners in the league, that you will enter in good faith and bring a team to play their teams. That's really what it is. And so we had this commitment now. And this thing came up, and it was like, I don't know what we're going to do, because we're committed. You know what I mean? We're in to do this. And so, I'll just fast forward through that 8-month period from that date to us merging with John. But gosh, yeah, I learned a lot in that 8-month period. You know what I mean? It was a magnitude of a deal that I probably had no business being in, given the door that I came into this whole thing through, as like the chairman of a nonprofit. You know what I mean? But I had to do the deal.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I don't know who else could have done the deal.
I had to do the deal, look, I learned a lot about how deals like that get done.
Yeah.
And it was a good deal. And it's like, the fruit is we had an incredible first season, and the legacy is in place. And the guy who started the nonprofit, the founder, Chris Jones of the nonprofit club, is an employee at the team, and he's running fan engagement. And it's like, I mean, it's
to be able to have that through line says something about how well, and sort of how gently this was carried, right?
Everybody who was involved, look, you're dealing with millions and millions of dollars. So that brought tension to the situation, and that should be obvious, because you're dealing with millions of dollars.
Yeah.
But how it turned out, it should be evident that everybody wanted a good ending. You know what I mean? And it was just like, how do we get to the good ending, right? You know what I mean? Like, what role is everyone going to play as we get there? And we got there. I mean, and it's amazing, but yeah, I mean, I learned a lot. I learned a lot through that process. Super grateful for it.
Yeah. Congratulations. I mean, I know what it's like to deal with the city, certainly not on the scale that you did, but it can be a challenge, to say the least.
Yeah. But it was great. And, I started writing this book, and I started writing this book in 2015. And, the soccer experience in the book is the penultimate chapter, and it's the chapter I named Orchestrate, because it is about trying to do something that is so much bigger than you. You know what I mean? And we should all be so fortunate to, at one point in our life, have an opportunity to be a part of something that makes us sort of see how we can play a role in something that's much bigger than us. You know what I mean? And like understand what that requires. And it's a very, very different thing than like the founder pride. I made this thing, I'm going to be the boss. It's not that thing. It's a different thing.
It's the perfect word for that, because you have different sections, and within those sections, different instruments, and they're all trying to work together. So it really is the perfect term for that, and brought together all of your experience, right? And all of your learnings, and the city is better for it. So I loved reading about that part. I think if I'm right here, Alex, we are coming up on the time for Q&A. So Y'all, please feel free to jump in on the chat if you have any questions for Marcus. And I'm going to, one more time, if you joined late, plug the book. It is Create and Orchestrate by our guest, Marcus Whitney. It's a fascinating read as an entrepreneur, and it would be for someone who is not in entrepreneurship, who wants to learn more about Marcus's story, about really, I mean, you are kind of one of the, Nashville entrepreneur icons in this town, so Marcus's story is a lot of the Nashville story, I think. And so if you kind of want to learn about how that path got paved through one of the best, it's a terrific book, and I would encourage all of you to read it. Someone, don't be shy, ask a question. Somebody's got to want to know about these mermaids in the background.
Right, exactly. Let's talk about the mermaids.
No questions? Jump on in, y'all. Okay. Well, I know that, here we go. Marcus himself is a game changer. He's always inspiring and authentic. Agreed. Margaret Littman, my dear, what do you have to ask? Marcus, why do you think Nashville is a city that is so rich in entrepreneurship?
That's a great question. People have given me answers as to that because I've only been here 20 years, right? And so I think anything I would say would have to just come from my 20-year experience, but I was the beneficiary of decades of work that it took to sort of get to where it is today. But here's probably what I would say. Entrepreneurship is American. It's it is one of our great virtues in this country, and I think all great cities in this country aspire to have a great legacy of entrepreneurship, all of them. And I think that when Nashville decided that it wanted to be a great city, it got really, really serious about entrepreneurship. That's an honest answer that I can give from the 20 years that I've been here, like what I've seen and what I've experienced. When I got here, as I've been told, downtown was already cleaned up. And so the Titans were already here, the Predators were already here. So, I got to come to a town sort of at the beginning of it making a decision that it wanted to be a great American city. And the leaders, make no mistake, like there are leaders in this city, like there are leaders in every city, that get together and talk about this stuff. And then they commit capital and time and energy, and they try to align with the politicians that have been elected, the elected officials, to make these things happen. They're conscious efforts. And look, people have said things like it's a songwriter city and there's a real collaborative spirit. I mean, that may be true. There's probably some truth to that. But I think that I just think that the people who are here have great aspirations for the city.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I think.
Yeah. And another thing I'll add to that is I think people in this city are willing to work across different verticals.
Yes.
And that is not something I see in every city, where they are quick to introduce you to someone. There's not a lot of ego about it. And that's, I would say a differentiator. Oh, we've got some more questions. What is your best advice for new entrepreneurs in a startup with limited capital, as founders? So founders, new entrepreneurs in a startup with limited capital, what's your best advice for them?
So, so if this person has has read my book, hopefully they've seen in the 8 core concepts that the second concept, which means the second most important concept in business, is finance. And this took me a long time to learn. You have to right size what you're doing to your financial capabilities.
Say more about that.
It's like the iron triangle, right? It's just live within your means. Like,
Yep.
you know, if your aspirations far exceed your financial capabilities, you're going to be a miserable person, and you're not necessarily going to be a great leader, because you will start to sacrifice things. Like, you'll start to sacrifice your, I mean, the only way to say it, you'll just start to sacrifice your morals. You know, this is where you get into the selling out business. You know what I mean? When you're not willing to like live within your current constraints. Now, if you are trying to build a business that requires startup capital, then you have to go get that capital. And you have to do what's necessary to get that capital. And there's lots of, the beautiful thing is there have never been more ways to get startup capital than there are in 2021. And we're only going to have more. We just got approval and listed on the Federal Register for an increase in the regulation for crowdfunding to go from 1.07 million to $5 million. So starting March,
that's a big deal.
Yeah, so starting March 15th, like if you're trying to start a business, you can go to like Republic or WeFunder. WeFunder's got people here in town, so you should probably go to WeFunder. Then you can go to one of these platforms, and they will help you structure a fundraise, an equity fundraise that's crowdfunding, and you can raise up to $5 million. Wow. So look, you legally could not do that, right? Even last year. So there've never been more ways to raise startup capital, but I would just say, really ask yourself like 10 times, over a 10-day period, do you really need to do it? Do you really need to raise the capital? Because the minute you do, you complicate the business. And you have to answer to investors. That's part of the deal. When you take capital, it's not that you get to take it and do whatever you want to do with it.
Take it, run away. Yeah.
No, it doesn't work that way. And so, I just think it's always better to try to generate revenue with the means that you have, if you can manage to do that. And sometimes just committing to that will help you to be more crafty and scrappy, and you'll start to find things that other people wouldn't have found because they weren't as committed as you were. And those things long term can be the difference in profit margin in your business. You know what I mean? If you can scale them. So, because sometimes you can scale craftiness. People are so quick to want to like do the fast thing that costs the most money, the predictable path. But sometimes it's like spend the extra month trying to figure out how to do it for free, and then like you nail it, and then that's a core competitive like advantage for your business. So
yeah, I think that's great advice. And it seems like the path of a lot of entrepreneurs I know have been to like bootstrap it yourself, then go to like a crowdfunding, friends and family.
Yep.
And just meet with as many people as you can. We have the Entrepreneur Center here in town, which is a wonderful resource.
Yep.
I've gone through a program there, met a ton of people there. The membership is like $15 a month. So one would think you could afford that. So I've met a lot of people through that. And then what's that phrase? It's like, if you want advice, ask. No, if you want money, ask for advice. But if you want advice, ask for, or something like that. It's like, if you just go to people and who eventually you might want money from and just ask them for advice, it can sometimes lead to them saying, "This is great. I'll just give you money for this."
Yeah. If you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, look, if you want to fundraise, I just want to make sure that you are comfortable being a full-time salesperson to rich people.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And you got to make sure you like that. And you're good enough at it that it actually, it makes you feel good. some people are very good at fundraising. I'm not bad at fundraising, so I don't mind it so much, but it ain't for everybody.
Yeah. So I've got one more sort of business type question, and then two on the kind of the personal side. So hopefully
Okay.
we'll have time for all of that. I'll hit this last business one first. Miriam says, in reading the book, I was impressed and intimidated by Marcus's discipline in creating balance in life and his calendar. Can you talk more about that process of developing the tools for making that work?
Yes. So my wife Rachel knows about this. I pretty much obsess about my calendar because I realized at some point, I don't remember exactly when it was, but at some point I realized the primary currency that I was operating on as an entrepreneur was time. The primary, the most important, by far the most important. And it was sort of ludicrous to me that I didn't have serious systems for how I managed that time. Now, when I was in my lower form of entrepreneurship, and I did not connect the dots between my well-being and my performance, all I tried to do was maximize the blocks in the calendar to fit in as much stuff as I could, and like outsource the booking of my meetings on my calendar. And I just optimized for productivity, not really a false sense of productivity, because I would burn out or whatever. And then the actual quality or effectiveness went down. And so like I was showing up for all this stuff, but I wasn't as good. But that was my first mode of doing that. Then I started realizing, actually,
you're optimizing for balance now, it seems like, or more so of like the physical, the spiritual, and the hustle.
I am optimizing for the best life possible now. And that means, well, look, let me just say this. Annie, we talk about sobriety. I've been sober for 2 years. One of the things that happens with sobriety is that you have to deal with all the stuff. You can't like run away from the stuff, right? And so once I stopped having a way to run away from the stuff, I stopped wanting to have stressful things happening in my life. It's like, how do I get the stress out of my life? And it basically boiled down to sleep.
Isn't that so funny? Sorry.
Sleep.
Yeah.
Exercise.
Yep.
Some I don't even know what the right word is, because I don't want to say minimum. It's more like hitting the threshold, crossing the threshold on the required amount of time with my significant other. Okay. And some time for myself. And actually, doing those things has resulted in such a low stress life that the quality of my work, even in like, let's just say half the time, because it's kind of something like half the time, is so much higher that like I've kind of cracked the code. Most people don't. A lot of people don't think they deserve it.
That's huge.
Okay. A lot of people don't think they deserve to. They don't think they deserve to treat their time that way. I sort of flip it on its head a little bit, and I say, I am so responsible to so many things, businesses, organizations that I sit on boards of, my elder, my senior parents, not elderly, my senior parents, my wife, my kids, my friends. I'm so responsible to all these people that I owe them all the very best me. That's and right. There is no shot of that happening if I don't do all this other stuff. And eventually everyone gets it, because they see consistently you're not, like, it's real.
Yep.
You are showing up day after day, week after week, month after month, so much better than you did before. Like in the beginning, they're like, oh, there's a reason why people don't feel like they deserve to spend time on themselves, because other people project on you because they don't do this for themselves. So they project on you, right? Okay. And then you have to sort of deal with their projection. But as long as you can understand, this has nothing to do with you. You just have to stay in the pocket long enough and like fight through that.
And you have to get right with yourself first to not care that those external factors are happening, right?
Yes. But over time, people will get on your page and they'll realize,
or they'll go away, which is also fine.
I'm fine with that too. But I haven't lost anybody.
Yeah, which is great.
I haven't lost any of the people that I care about. They're all, my wife, my partner, my kids can't my kids can't get rid of me. I mean, or my parents. But like I've just got better relationships with everybody, and I'm better in the role. And it just is all, it's all connected. It's all connected. It's just one you. There's not like entrepreneur you and then,
And I think that kind of answers that question in here about how have you balanced family, parenting, and entrepreneurship. I think that's kind of a perfect way to tie that up, to say it's all the same. To me, that's how it feels too. When I'm like in the flow of life, whatever, how I treat people and, how I do business and if my mental health and my spiritual health and my emotional health are all like firing in the right spots, then it's all the same.
Yeah.
And it's easier.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of work to get there.
Takes a lot of work to get there. Takes a lot of work to get there, for sure. No question.
So let's talk. This is the JCC, of course. So let's talk about obviously your wife Rachel, who I love dearly. Hello, Rachel. She's Jewish, and you converted to Judaism.
Yep.
So can you talk a little bit about what role Judaism plays in your life now?
So yeah. It's a great question. I find Judaism to be grounding. I grew up as a Christian Baptist, but like Southern Black Baptist, like Martin Luther King, not like the Southern Baptist thing that, I didn't even know was a thing until I moved to the South.
Important to differentiate.
Yeah, I didn't even know. I thought the only Baptist was like the Martin Luther King kind of Baptist, right?
Right.
And look, I mean, for what anybody would say about it, my view on what I experienced was that the most holy days were very much about God. And my experience of the high holidays as a Jew is like, they're very heavy. Yom Kippur is a very, it's just a deeply reflective day. And I actually think it is in part responsible for some of the transformation that's happened for me over like that day, is responsible for some of the transformation that I've been through over the last 5 years, since I've converted. The fasting, the spending all day in the temple. I mean, I really kind of missed it this year, the fasting, the spending all day in the temple, the idea that once a year you really focus on atonement. I mean, just think about overlaying that with sobriety, right? You know what I mean?
For sure. It's like a what is it? What step is that? 8th and 9th step. Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy to spend an entire day doing that. And so yeah, I think that it has been a more like livable spiritual garb.
Yeah, like
For
a looser garment than I was raised. I'm a recovering Catholic, among other things. So yeah, and I was, married to a Jewish man. I loved the Jewish religion. It's beautiful. And Yom Kippur was especially one of my favorites because you could make is the New Year. You could make your get a 3 or 4 month head start on everyone else. But, yeah,
I mean, look, there's so many holidays and so many celebrations and so much tradition and so many things. But for me, the study that led to the conversion was very transformational, and just a lot of the reflection that caused. And
did you do that here in Nashville with people from the JCC?
at the temple.
At the temple.
Hmm. Yeah, Shayna Mackler, our rabbi, and like one of my best friends. So, so yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been woven into the fabric of the best version of yourself, which is who you are now, which is really a beautiful thing.
It's inseparable because it was part of the experience, you know what I mean? And I was able to use what it gave me, to become this version of myself that I really like and that I wanted to be, you know what I mean? So
yeah, and what greater gift than being comfortable in your own skin, right?
Amen.
All right, I've got one last question, and then we're gonna let y'all go. Thank you so much for all of these questions and hanging with us and having this be so interactive. It's really been such a pleasure. Last question: do you have any specific advice for starting up a nonprofit?
Yes, specific advice for starting up a nonprofit. A couple of things. One, if you want to move fast, find a fiscal sponsor that you can really jive with and that can really, really help you in more ways than just providing the tax deductible capabilities, but one that can really sort of mentor and truly like sponsor you into the ways of a nonprofit. The second thing I would say is run a business, and intend for to the greatest degree possible, intend for your business to thrive on earned revenue and not on philanthropy, because I think philanthropy is becoming a very, very crowded, difficult market. And I think that the most sustainable nonprofits that I know, and I've sat on all sorts of nonprofit boards, are the ones that have figured out how to earn revenue.
Yeah. Right. Sometimes people think nonprofit as like non-revenue generating, which is absolutely not the case.
No, it's not the case at all. I know nonprofits that are sitting on a lot of cash.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A lot of cash. So yeah, for sure.
Well, good. We're right at 8:00.
We made it.
Marcus, what a beautiful journey we were on. I'm so grateful to have been part of that with you. Y'all go out and buy this book, Marcus Whitney, Create and Orchestrate. It is wonderful. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're not an entrepreneur, if you just like Nashville stories, you're a local hero to me and to lots, Marcus. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you, Annie. Always love talking to you.
I just wanted to thank you both. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Annie. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And remind everyone that we have 4 more events for our Jewish book series this year. So check out our website, nashvilljcc.org/book. Thank you both. Have a great night, everyone.
Have a wonderful night.